I simply sat there, holding his hand, feeling the warmth of his skin, the steadiness of his grip, the impossible weight of what was passing between us. "I know," I said. "I feel it too." We stayed like that for 30 seconds, maybe more. Then, slowly, deliberately, we released each other's hands and returned to our laptops, as if nothing had happened. As if we hadn't just crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. As if we hadn't just admitted, in the quiet of an empty office, that we were falling in love. But we both knew. And from that night forward, nothing was ever the same. Love quiet, forbidden midlife romance. Subscribe to Noah's Awakening for more slow burn stories. Chapter 3: The Year We Almost Had. The weeks that followed were the happiest and most agonizing of my life. James and I fell into a rhythm. It started with the small things, longer conversations at the end of meetings, lingering looks across the conference table, emails that said more than the words alone could convey. "Coffee later?" His message would read, and my heart would leap, and I would type back a casual "sure, sounds good," as if I wasn't already planning my outfit, as if I wasn't already counting the minutes. We met for coffee nearly every day. Not at the office is too conspicuous, too dangerous, but at the small cafe in the lobby of his building, or the Italian place on Franklin Street where the owner knew him by name and always seated us in the same corner booth. We talked for hours about work, about life, about the gap between the people we were expected to be and the people we actually were. We laughed together, which surprised me. I had always thought of myself as serious, humorless, but James made me feel light, playful, young. He told me about his children, Daniel, shy and intellectual, already talking about applying to MIT, Sophie, bold and creative, obsessed with marine biology, and I found myself imagining a future in which I knew them, in which I was part of their lives, in which the three of us sat around a dinner table laughing at one of his terrible dad jokes. We never touched again, not like that night in the conference room. But we didn't have to. The electricity between us was constant, humming, a living thing that lived in the space between our bodies. Every time we were in the same room, I was aware of exactly where he was, how he was standing, what he was doing. Every time our eyes met across a conference table or a crowded room, I felt that same electric shock, that same sense of recognition, that same certainty that he was feeling it too. And he was. I saw it in the way he looked at me when he thought I wasn't watching, a gaze that lingered, that held, that said everything his words could not. In the way his voice softened when he said my name, almost imperceptibly, as if the word itself was precious. In the way he found excuses to brush past me in the hallway, a hand on the small of my back, fleeting, electric, that he always apologized for but never quite managed to avoid. He was, above all else, a gentleman. And gentlemen do not betray their marriages, their families, their vows. I respected that about him more than I can say, even as it was slowly, exquisitely destroying me. In January, I made a decision. I couldn't keep doing this, couldn't keep living in this liminal space, this half-life of almost love, this exquisite torture of wanting something I couldn't have. I needed to escape, to create distance, to give myself the chance to move on. I applied for a transfer to the Chicago office, a promotion, a fresh start, a chance to put an ocean of distance between myself and the impossible thing I felt. The VP of Strategic Development for the Midwest region, a significant step up, a corner office, a 6-figure salary with bonuses that would change my life. I told myself it was the right thing to do. The mature thing. The thing a sensible, self-respecting woman would do when she found herself falling for a married man. The morning I submitted my transfer request, James found me in the hallway outside the conference room. He must have heard about it somehow. Margaret had mentioned it at the morning senior staff meeting, and news traveled fast in a firm of 300 people. He looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read, something between hurt and understanding, resignation and frustration. "I heard you're leaving," he said. His voice was carefully neutral, but I saw the tightness around his eyes, the way his jaw was set against whatever emotion was threatening to break through. "The Chicago opportunity is too good to pass up," I said. My voice sounded strange, too bright, like a bad actress in a community theater production. "It's a VP position. I've been stuck at the same level for 4 years. This is the next step." He nodded slowly. "You're right. It's a great opportunity. You'll be excellent over there." We stood there, 3 feet apart, the words we couldn't say filling the space between us like a physical presence. The hallway was empty. It was early, before the office had fully come to life. In the pale winter light filtering through the windows, James looked older, more tired, more human than I had ever seen him. "Rachel," he said, and his voice cracked, just slightly, just enough for me to hear the fracture beneath the composure. "I want you to know, these past few months—" He stopped, swallowed, started again. "These past few months have meant more to me than you know. They have been," he paused, searching for the word, "illuminating. Like waking up after a long sleep. Like remembering who I was before I became who I am." I felt tears threatening behind my eyes. I blinked them back viciously. "James, please," he said. "Don't say anything. I just needed you to know. I needed you to know that what we had, whatever it was, it mattered. It will always matter." He reached out and touched my face, his fingertips grazing my cheek, feather-light, achingly gentle. I closed my eyes, overwhelmed by the contact, by the tenderness of it, by the enormity of what I was losing. "I'm going to miss you," I whispered. "I know," he said. "I'm going to miss you too." He turned and walked away. I stood in that hallway for 5 minutes, my back against the wall, my hand pressed to the place where his fingers had touched me, tears streaming silently down my face. 3 weeks later, I moved to Chicago. 3 weeks later, I began the longest year of my life. Chapter 4: The Year of Almost. Chicago was supposed to be my escape. Instead, it became my prison. I threw myself into work with a fury that alarmed my new colleagues. I arrived at the office at 7, left at 11, worked weekends without complaint. The senior leadership in the Chicago office was impressed. They had never seen anyone so dedicated, so relentless, so determined to prove herself. Within 6 months, I was promoted to VP of Strategic Development, exactly the title I had been promised, with the corner office and the salary to match. I was given the best accounts, the biggest budgets, the most high-profile projects. I was, by every external measure, a success. None of it mattered. Every night, in my high-rise apartment overlooking the Chicago River, I would lie awake and think of him. I would replay our conversations, cataloging every word, every glance, every almost touch. I would wonder what he was doing, who he was with, whether he was thinking of me the way I thought of him, whether he ever felt the same aching, relentless longing in the quiet hours of the night. I would look at the city lights reflected in the dark water of the river and imagine him somewhere out there, in Boston, going about his life, being the husband and father and CEO that the world expected him to be. We still talked, occasionally. An email here, a text there. Always professional, always careful, always weighted with everything we couldn't say. "How's the Chicago office?" His first email had read, "I hope you're settling in. The winter there is no joke. Make sure you're dressing warmly." "It's cold here," I had replied. but the coffee is good. How's the Boston office? How are Daniel and Sophie? My email back was longer than his, full of questions about his life, his family, his work. I told myself I was just being friendly, just maintaining a professional relationship with an important client. But we both knew the truth. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. He was typing. I watched the screen, my heart pounding. Everyone's well, he wrote finally. Sophie made the varsity swim team. Daniel got into all his top choice colleges. Work is busy. Richardson Holdings is considering an IPO in the next 2 years. Things are good. Everything is good. I read the email 3 times. Everything is good. Such a simple phrase, carrying so much weight. I wondered if he had written and rewritten it a dozen times, as I had done so many times before. I wondered if the careful neutrality of his words masked the same chaos I felt inside. That sounds wonderful, I typed back. Congratulations to Sophie and Daniel. I hope you're doing well too. I added a smiley face, an emoji I almost never used, that felt strange and vulnerable on my screen. He sent back a smiley face in return. And I stared at that little yellow smiley face for 20 minutes, reading into it like scripture, finding in its simple curves 1,000 hidden meanings. In March, I flew back to Boston for a conference, not a Hartwell event, but an industry gathering that happened to be held at the same convention center where I had spent so many hours over the past 2 years. I had 2 hours between meetings, and I found myself, without quite meaning to, standing outside the offices of Hartwell and Associates. I didn't go in. I wasn't sure what I would say, what I would do. I wasn't even sure I wanted to see him. I was terrified that the feelings had faded, that the distance had healed the wound, that I would walk into that building and find that the spell had been broken. But I also couldn't bear the thought of being so close and not knowing, not seeing, not having some proof that what we had was real. I stood outside for 10 minutes, watching the people streamed in and out, colleagues I recognized, clients I had worked with, the doorman who had always smiled at me on my way in and out. The building looked the same. The street looked the same. The October light had been replaced by the pale gray of an early Boston spring. And everything reminded me of him. The following week, I received an email from him. I heard you were in town, he wrote. I'm sorry I missed you. I was traveling for work, New York, of all places. If I had known, I would have rearranged my schedule. My heart hammered against my ribs. I typed and retyped my response a dozen times before finally sending. Next time. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. He was thinking. I could picture him in his office, the late afternoon light fading outside his window, his reading glasses on, his brow slightly furrowed as he considered his words. Next time, he replied. It was a promise and a hope and a prayer, all wrapped up in 2 simple words. Love quiet, forbidden midlife romance. Subscribe to Noah's Awakening for more slow burn stories. The next time came in June. I was promoted again, Senior VP, West Coast Operations, a title that came with even greater responsibility and an expanded territory that would keep me traveling to our West Coast offices regularly. The company hosted a gala at the Four Seasons in Boston to celebrate the promotions, and I was expected to attend, to shake hand, to smile, to pretend I was the success story everyone believed me to be. I saw James across the ballroom, resplendent in a black tuxedo, speaking with a group of investors I didn't recognize. He looked handsome, distinguished, every inch the self-made man who had conquered the business world through intelligence and discipline and an almost superhuman work ethic. But when his gaze found mine across the crowded room, I saw everything. The longing, the regret, the years of wanting, all of it visible for just an instant before his expression smoothed back into the careful neutrality he wore so well. We were introduced by mutual colleagues, our handshake professional and brief. But when our eyes met, I saw the same electric recognition I had felt that first day in the conference room, as if no time had passed at all, as if we were still those two people standing in the golden October light, just beginning to understand what was happening to us. "Congratulations on your promotion," he said. His voice was warm, sincere, but I heard the effort it took to keep it steady. "You've done exceptionally well." "So have you," I said. "I heard about the IPO consideration." "That's incredible news." "We'll see," he said, with a self-deprecating smile. "There's still a lot of work to be done." We made small talk for 5 minutes, surrounded by people, the words we really wanted to say locked behind our teeth. I learned that Caroline was traveling. She had gone to visit her sister in California, a trip they had planned months ago, before either of us knew I would be in town. I learned that Sophie was thriving, that Daniel had chosen Harvard for the fall, that Richardson Holdings was on track for its best year ever. Everything was good. Everything was exactly as it should be. And yet, when he leaned in, close enough that his lips were near my ear, and whispered, "Can I see you? Tomorrow? After you fly back?" I felt that same seismic shift I had felt 3 years ago, that same sense of the world dividing into before and after. I should have said no. I knew I should have said no. I had spent 3 years trying to get over this man, trying to build a life that didn't center on him, trying to convince myself that what we had was a fantasy I needed to release if I ever wanted to be happy. "Yes," I breathed. The word escaped before I could stop it, before I could consider the consequences, before I could do anything but surrender to the truth of what I felt. Yes. We met the next afternoon at a small cafe in Beacon Hill, the kind of place with worn leather booth and history in the walls and coffee that tasted like it had been brewed correctly the first time. It was raining, a soft, gray New England rain that made the city look like a watercolor painting, all soft edges and muted colors, and we sat in a corner booth, nursing cups of coffee that had long gone cold, and we talked. We talked for 3 hours. About everything. About the years apart, the jobs, the promotions, the loneliness. About his children. Daniel was now in college, a freshman at Harvard, still figuring out what he wanted to study. Sophie was a teenager on the verge of becoming a young woman, beautiful and brilliant and starting to date. About my life in Chicago, the apartment I hated, the friends I hadn't made, the man I couldn't forget. And then, in the middle of a sentence, he stopped. "Rachel," he said. His voice was different now, raw, unguarded, stripped of all the careful polish she usually wore like armor. "I have to tell you something." I knew what was coming. I had known it since the moment he walked into that conference room 4 years ago. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure he could hear it. "I filed for divorce last month," he said. The words came out in a rush, as if he had been holding them in for a long time and could finally let them go. "Caroline and we've been unhappy for a long time. We stayed together for the children, for appearances, for the business. But I can't do it anymore. I can't keep pretending. I haven't been in love with her for years, and I owe it to both of us to be honest about that." My heart stopped, then restarted faster than before. "James." "I know," he said. "I know I should have said something before. I know I've been a coward. I spent years telling myself that I was staying for the right reasons, that the children needed us together, that the timing wasn't right, that I needed to be sure. But the truth is, I was scared. I was scared of what it would mean to blow up my life, to disrupt everything I had built. And I was scared of what it would mean to come to you, to admit what I felt, to risk rejection, to risk losing you entirely if you didn't feel the same way. He reached across the table and took my hands in his. So I kept waiting, he continued. Year after year, telling myself the timing would be better next year, or the year after that, or once the children were older. And then you transferred to Chicago, and I thought I had lost my chance. That I had waited too long, and you had moved on, and I would spend the rest of my life wondering what might have been. James. But I never stopped thinking about you, he said, his voice cracking. Every day. Every night. You were with me constantly, in my thoughts, in my dreams, in the choices I made and the things I said and the person I was becoming. You changed me, Rachel. You showed me what it could feel like to be truly alive, truly present, truly myself. And I won't spend another day without telling you that I love you. I have loved you since the moment I walked into that conference room and saw you sitting in the golden light. And I should have told you then. I should have been braver. But I wasn't. And I'm sorry. I was crying. I hadn't realized it until a tear fell onto the back of his hand, the one that was wrapped around mine. I love you too, I said. The words came out broken, barely audible, but I knew he heard me. I have loved you for 4 years. And I have tried so hard to stop. I moved across the country. I dated other people. I went to dinners and coffee dates and even one disastrous relationship that lasted 3 months and went nowhere. I told myself it was impossible, that you were married, that I was being a fool. But I couldn't stop. I couldn't forget you. Every time I thought I was finally moving on, something would remind me of you. A song, a book, a cup of coffee from that Italian place on Franklin Street, and I would be right back where I started, wanting you, missing you, wondering what might have been. He released my hands and reached up to brush the tears from my face, his touch achingly tender. Then don't, he said. Don't forget me. Don't run from this. Don't let fear or pride or old habits get in the way. Just give me a chance. Give us a chance. I know I'm not young anymore, and I know I come with baggage, children, an ex-wife, a career that demands too much of my time. But I also know what I want, Rachel. I want you. I want to wake up next to you and fall asleep next to you and build a life with you that neither of us has to pretend about. I want to be with someone who sees me, really sees me, the way you do. I want to spend the rest of my life being the person I am when I'm with you. I looked at him, this man I had loved for 4 years, this man I had dreamed about and mourned and tried desperately to forget. And I made my choice. Yes, I said. Yes. I'll give us a chance. And in that cafe, in the rain, surrounded by the warm amber light of the afternoon, we began. Chapter 5, The 2 years that changed everything. We were together for 2 years. They were the happiest years of my life, and also the most terrifying. I had spent so long convincing myself that love was something that happened to other people, that I had somehow forfeited my right to it by the choices I'd made. And so, even as James and I built something beautiful together, part of me was always waiting for it to fall apart. Waiting for the other shoe to drop. Waiting for the universe to realize its mistake and snatch away this impossible gift. We started slowly. Long weekends in Maine, at a small inn his parents had loved, perched on a cliff overlooking Casco Bay. We would wake up early and watch the sunrise over the water, drinking coffee on the porch and talking for hours about nothing and everything. He taught me to sail, the same way his father had taught him, patient and methodical, his hand covering mine on the tiller. "Feel the wind," he would say. "Feel what the boat wants to do. Don't fight it, work with it." And I would nod, pretending to understand, secretly just watching his face, the way the morning light caught his eyes, the way his whole body relaxed when he was on the water. Dinners in Boston, Chicago, New York, the cities where our lives had intersected, now transformed into something new. We revisited the Italian place on Franklin Street, and the owner smiled knowingly at our joined hands. We explored neighborhoods neither of us had seen before, pointing out beautiful old buildings and funny shop signs and children playing in the park. We were tourists in our own histories, rewriting the story of what might have been. He introduced me to his children properly, not as his colleague, not as his friend, but as the woman he was seeing. Daniel, home from Harvard for the summer, was polite but wary. He'd been old enough to understand what his parents' divorce meant, and he was protective of his mother in a way that was both touching and frustrating. Sophie, however, took to me immediately. She was 13, at that perfect age when girls are old enough to be insightful but young enough to still believe in romance. "Dad seems happier," she said to me once, when James was out of the room. We were at their house in Back Bay, a beautiful brownstone that was being sold as part of the divorce settlement, and she had found me in the kitchen making sandwiches for the two of us. I haven't seen him this happy in years. Even before Mom checked out. "Checked out?" I asked carefully. Sophie shrugged, a gesture so much like James's that it made my heart ache. She was never really there, you know? Even before. She loved us, I'm sure of that. But she didn't see us. Not the way you see Dad. I didn't know what to say to that. I just pulled her into a hug and held her tight, feeling the weight of her against me, the reality of this family I was slowly becoming part of. I met his ex-wife once, the cool, elegant woman named Caroline, with perfect blonde hair and a smile that never quite reached her eyes. We met for coffee at her request. She wanted to see what kind of woman James had left her for. I prepared myself for confrontation, for coldness, for the kind of passive-aggressive hostility I had seen in movies. Instead, she surprised me. "I knew this would happen eventually," she said, after James had stepped away to take a call. Her voice was matter-of-fact, almost resigned. "I just didn't know it would take so long. He's been in love with someone else for years. I could feel it, even when I didn't want to admit it. And now that I look back, I think I always knew it was you." "I'm sorry," I said. It was inadequate, but it was true. "Don't be," she said. We were together for 23 years, and for most of them, I thought that was enough. Stability, companionship, shared history. But James was always looking for something more, something I couldn't give him. I don't think I ever really knew who he was, underneath all the ambition and the responsibility. I just knew that he was restless, and that I couldn't fix it. She paused, studying me with those cool blue eyes. "But you see him. I can tell. You see all of him, the parts he shows the world and the parts he keeps hidden. That's rare. Don't waste it." She stood to leave, then paused. "Take care of him," she said. "He's more fragile than he looks." I began to imagine a future, a real future, with James at the center of it. I pictured holidays and anniversaries, shared apartments, and intertwined lives. I pictured growing old with him, gray-haired and content, surrounded by the family we had built together. I pictured Sunday mornings with the newspaper and Friday nights with a bottle of wine and quiet conversations that lasted until dawn. I pictured a life that was mine, not the life I had planned or expected, but a life that was better, deeper, more meaningful than anything I had dared to imagine. And then, in the spring of 2017, James called me in the middle of the night.